Know what to eat, but find yourself not eating it. Perhaps you've been on diets and off again and just wonder why you can't stick to them. The Eating For You podcast, hosted by me, Sally Ann Pisk, will show you what's been missing so you can enjoy a healthier way of eating that lasts. Welcome to our new episode, and I look forward to unpacking the diet called OMAD, and that means 1 meal a day. And I've chosen that topic for today because it's been popping up in my newsfeed, and I really wanted to look to see whether there's any research that actually backed up the promises. So we're going to be unpacking this dietary approach to see the impacts on our body, mind, and our relationship with food. So this episode is going to be an exploration of OMAD from a mindful eating background, but also a review of the research evidence. So let's take a closer look at what OMAD really is. It means eating all of your daily calories within 1 meal, and often that's within 1 hour. However, there are some different versions of this diet, and some will actually include snacks, but some will strictly have that 1 meal a day. And there's no guidelines as to when you should eat that meal, but the research and popular reviews of this eating approach tend to say the meal is eaten in the evening. It does fall under the category of intermittent fasting or time-restricted feeding. However, it is very extreme when you compare it to perhaps the 18-6 feeding regime or intermittent fasting regime, which means you were fasting for 18 hours and eating within that 6-hour window. It has gained popularity, OMAD, for weight loss, its simplicity, and the claims of metabolic health benefits. And of course, we're going to be reviewing these today. So some of the promises of OMAD are its simplicity, that it may actually improve insulin sensitivity and inflammation, assist weight reduction, and help us to actually tune into physical hunger with more confidence. So if you're not that fond of planning meals or get overwhelmed with decisions about what to eat, then certainly eating 1 meal a day simplifies that. But as I said, some of these diet programs come with guidelines of what to eat in terms of what should be on that plate, in terms of whole foods and a balance of foods, whereas others leave the choice purely to you. So a plate of food can really be whatever you want it to be. So let's have a look and see whether OMAD can improve insulin sensitivity and also reduce chronic inflammation. Studies on time-restricted feeding show potential reductions in insulin levels and inflammatory markers such as C-reactive protein. However, these benefits are more related to intermittent fasting and not so much on OMAD, because the research really isn't there to suggest that eating 1 meal a day is superior to other forms of intermittent fasting or eating 2 or 3 meals a day. And from the research on intermittent fasting, we know that fasting may reduce blood sugar levels and certain risk factors for heart disease, such as the low density lipoprotein or LDL cholesterol. However, the research continues, and it's still not 100% that intermittent fasting is superior in regards to weight loss or these metabolic markers compared to just reducing calories eaten in the day. I know this can be really confusing, but I'm going to offer you a solution as we work through the podcast today. So any weight reduction that comes from OMAD or intermittent fasting in general is related to reducing how much energy you're eating. So that's the calories or kilojoules from food. An advantage from the OMAD point of view is that you don't have to count calories. Of course, as I said before, some will give you stricter guidelines on what to eat and what not to eat, whereas some will just allow you to eat whatever you want. But as I just mentioned with intermittent fasting, it's the same with OMAD. There's little evidence to suggest that this is a superior way of eating in terms of losing weight. And of course, we have to ask the question, just because the weight comes off, is OMAD a way to keep the weight off for good? So not being able to eat for 23 hours will definitely get you in touch with your true hunger or your physical hunger. And this is sort of promoted as a benefit of OMAD. But what happens if you start to feel hungrier in less than 23 hours? And certainly there's no research evidence to say that eating one meal a day better aligns your eating with your hunger and satiety cues. So again, with whatever dietary approach we're looking at, we need to not just think about the short-term promises of this diet, but whether it's actually going to be sustainable. You will find yourself going into the refrigerator and pantry more often because you will feel hungry within a 23-hour period. So from a mindfulness perspective, pausing to feel physical hunger builds self-trust, but only if the hunger is honoured in a timely and gentle way. So recapping on the promises of OMAD, the jury is still out as to whether intermittent fasting, one meal a day, or just reducing calories over a 24-hour period will deliver any differences in regards to weight loss. But as I said before, always think, can I maintain this way of eating to keep the weight off? There is no calorie counting with OMAD. It doesn't exclude foods, or as I said, some may actually encourage you to eat more and less of certain foods. So a little bit confusing there because there's not just one OMAD approach. There is little evidence to suggest that OMAD can aid weight loss any more than other weight reduction approaches. And there's also debate whether it does correct metabolic markers, and we're going to be taking a look at that very soon. So can OMAD actually cause any harm? There's not sufficient research to confirm how long it is safe to follow the diet or any potential adverse effects through rebound weight gain, increased hunger, and nutritional adequacy. So yes, I suspect you probably couldn't stay on the diet for that long, so maybe length is not a concern. But there's certainly some concerns around medical conditions such as diabetes. So if you have type 1 diabetes, certainly OMAD is not going to be the preferred way of eating for you because it's going to be very hard to regulate your blood sugar levels over the 24-hour period. Similarly, if you're eating just one meal a day and you have type 2 diabetes, then it's going to be, again, very hard to get those blood sugar levels or keep those blood sugar levels in the recommended range for you. So looking a little bit closer at possible harm coming from an eating approach such as OMAD, you may try to override natural hunger and satiety signals because over a 23-hour period, you certainly will develop a drive to eat. Nutritional deficiencies are a concern, such as the impact on mental health, your focus, and overall energy levels. And there are hormonal and metabolic concerns for women. And there's a few other negative health consequences I'll share with you as well. So waiting 23 hours to eat will most likely disconnect you from your natural hunger patterns. And binge eating or feelings of extreme fullness can occur when eating patterns like this are adopted. OMAD often leads to ignoring early hunger, which goes against mindful eating. Research suggests that eating one meal a day may increase fasting blood sugar levels, delay the body's response to insulin, and increase levels of appetite-stimulating hormone ghrelin, and that is in comparison to eating 3 meals a day that are in tune with your natural hunger and satiety cycles. So mindful eating honours your body's cues, not a clock or some external rule. So there's a big difference here between OMAD and the eating for you approach, which is based on mindfulness. The types of nutritional deficiencies that could occur will depend obviously on what you're putting on your plate, but it is difficult to meet both macro, so I'm talking about carbohydrate, protein and fat, as well as micronutrient needs, your vitamins, your minerals, not to mention fibre as well. But certainly the deficiencies that I flagged today are fibre, iron, calcium, B vitamins, and protein can also be a concern. And in many cases, people will overload their plate with their favourite foods. So whether that be meat, whether that be vegetables, whether that be fast foods, because if we're not eating and we're getting this stronger drive to eat, then we're going to want those high fat foods and possibly high sugar foods, because we've got ourselves into such a level of hunger that that's what we're going to seek out. So everybody's plate is going to be different, but there is good evidence to suggest it's not necessarily the healthiest or the most nourishing foods that end up on the plate. I want to talk now about the possible impacts on mental health and focus following OMAD. With fasting for long periods, it's quite common to experience increased irritability, anxiety and fatigue, especially for women with our hormonal cycles. And as I've already alluded to, extreme restriction of food can trigger disordered eating patterns or obsessive thoughts about food. And most of my clients that I work with say to me, Sally-Ann, the last thing I want to do is worry or think about food anymore. So the downside of OMAD has been reported as feeling very hungry, experiencing fatigue due to an irregular supply of energy, feeling shaky, weak, irritable, and this could be to do with falling blood sugar levels, difficulty in concentrating. So I really emphasize this. You should always speak with your healthcare practitioner before making significant changes to your eating habits. While some people on OMAD might find it difficult to eat enough because they are in tune with their fullness signals, others will go on to develop overeating and disordered eating habits, potentially leading to binge eating. So restricted dieting certainly has a very strong impact on our psychological state. And this is quite common. Even what we would call normal dieting cycles, where you restrict calories or restrict a certain food group, that will lead often to overeating, this cycle of restriction and then overeating, and then all of the feelings of failure that go with that. So, of course, another piece of chocolate cake or another bag of chips is going to be quite appealing when we're feeling so distressed. I want to now talk about some of the more serious concerns for women around intermittent fasting. And this is not so much about OMAD, it's about intermittent fasting in general. So intermittent fasting may disrupt cortisol patterns, thyroid function, and menstrual cycles. Mindful eating, on the other hand, encourages you to tune in to how food supports your hormonal cycles and your energy levels. Intermittent fasting can have either a negative or positive effect on you, depending on how often you're doing intermittent fasting, how long you're fasting for, and your age, where you are in your life stage. What we have to remember is fasting is a stressor. So the more stress we have in our life, then the more impact intermittent fasting is going to have in a negative way. One area of research that shows promising impacts of intermittent fasting is polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS. Fasting, especially the 18-6 regime, has been shown in research to decrease androgen levels like testosterone, while supporting improved insulin sensitivity and management of body fat. However, that is only for some women and some types of PCOS. But there are a number of concerns with intermittent fasting, including interruption of the menstrual cycle, causing it to become less regular and potentially stop completely. Fasting, as I said, is perceived as a stressor, which can lead the hypothalamus to reduce the production of reproductive hormones, which are important for ovulation and a healthy, regular menstrual cycle. If you do notice changes in your cycle or your periods stop altogether, then I really recommend you talk to your healthcare practitioners about this. Studies suggest that thyroid function may decrease with prolonged fasting, though the thyroid may return to its normal function once the fasting has stopped. Any long-term period of energy restriction from food has the potential to affect thyroid function if it isn't balanced or counterbalanced with meal times where we are actually eating enough energy from food, so getting enough calories or kilojoules from food. The concern with lowered levels of thyroid hormone is that the lowered thyroid function is linked to fertility issues and potentially decreases progesterone levels as well. So for women, it really is essential that intermittent fasting isn't causing a reduction of thyroid hormones, especially if you're trying to get pregnant. And this is definitely something I encourage you to discuss with your doctor if you feel it might be impacting on you. So now let's have a look at women's hormones and how they relate to metabolism. We're going to look at estrogen, progesterone, and that constant communication that goes on in the body between the different hormones. So estrogen plays an essential role in metabolism, impacting insulin sensitivity, cholesterol metabolism, hunger and satiety signals, and maintaining nutrient balances. And healthy estrogen really equals healthy metabolism. And as women go through menopause, they can experience symptoms related to metabolic health as their estrogen levels decline. Progesterone impacts how women metabolize the key macronutrients of carbohydrate, fats, and proteins. And progesterone can play a role in blood glucose regulation, influencing insulin sensitivity throughout the menstrual cycle. Because estrogen and progesterone are constantly communicating with various hormone systems such as the thyroid, cortisol, and the stress response and inflammation pathways, it's easy to see how changes in hormone levels are continually impacting a woman's metabolic health. And it's important you understand how intermittent fasting will impact your hormones. So I really do recommend you work with a qualified healthcare practitioner specialising in women's health. And as I've said already, the impact on a woman's health depends on where they are in the cycle of life. So for women who are under the age of 40 or premenopausal, energy restriction can negatively affect those progesterone levels, especially in the second half of the menstrual cycle. Avoiding fasts during days 21 to 28 will help keep your progesterone levels at the level that are healthy for you. Fasting in the latter half of your cycle will possibly be too stressful for your body, and this could lead to an overproduction of stress hormones. Cortisol then impacts your insulin regulation, estrogen, and progesterone levels. So Could intermittent fasting be an option on days 1 to 15 of the cycle? It really depends, though, what you're seeking with the results that you are seeking with intermittent fasting. So if you're looking for a healthy long-term way of eating, then intermittent fasting is probably not the best option. However, if we talk about intermittent fasting as being perhaps a 12-hour fast overnight, then that is something that you could probably try out and discuss also with your healthcare practitioner if you do have some issues with your menstrual cycle already. Of course, whenever I talk about fasting with my clients, I say do it in tune with your body. That is, tune in to your hunger and satiety signals. So women, as they enter their 40s and 50s, may start to experience the shifting hormones as they move through perimenopause, and their cycle becomes less predictable. And you may have experienced this yourself. As estrogen and progesterone levels start to decline, the body hands over sex hormone production to the adrenal glands, making perimenopause a real time that we become more sensitive to stress and shifting energy levels. And any extreme intermittent fasting of any type is not recommended, as it will complicate the interpretation of the perimenopausal symptoms. Again, if you want to have an experience of fasting, then fasting for 12 hours overnight might be an option, but it would be best to get guidance from a qualified healthcare practitioner who has specialisation in women's health, because that way you can actually personalise both the eating and the lifestyle guidelines, so you can feel your best as you work through this bumpy time of life. And it is bumpy, and it can be bumpier for some more so than others. After menopause, a woman's hormone levels become more stable compared to when you had a menstrual cycle. So it could again be a time to try out intermittent fasting. But again, I would always suggest starting with an overnight 12-hour fast and really build your trust in tuning into physical hunger and satiety cues, so you can get confident in what your body needs and what the best times of eating are for you. Again, a personalised approach with your healthcare practitioner is recommended. It is certainly worth exploring because intermittent fasting may help postmenopausal women experience improvements in body composition, insulin response, blood pressure, and cholesterol levels. I just want to touch on the other negative health consequences of OMAD, and research is suggesting that certain types of intermittent fasting, and it really is related to the timing of the meal, can increase your risk of diabetes and heart disease, can contribute to lean muscle loss and reduced bone density. There's another one I want to add in here. If you are a sufferer of digestive problems or irritable bowel syndrome, then fasting for long periods of time is not recommended because it will not help your gut re-establish normal motility or function. So some concerns here that are a little bit different to what we've talked about before. When it comes to these metabolic risks, research suggests that eating later in the day is associated with cardiometabolic risk and less success with weight loss than eating earlier in the day. It also can impair glucose control and may increase the risk of type 2 diabetes. I've shared this before in other podcasts and in other forums that our bodies are mostly designed to eat in the first half of the day and having something very small later in the afternoon or early evening. Interestingly, there's research that shows that skipping breakfast is associated with a higher risk of cardiovascular disease mortality. Missing lunch or dinner carries a higher risk of all-cause mortality. And I think some of these research studies we have to step back and say, wow, what does this mean for me? And that's why I really embraced the mindful eating approach myself, because I read research all the time and I'm trying to decipher what is valid, what is meaningful, and how it impacts us practically in the day in terms of what we eat, when we eat, how we eat. But what most researchers are saying, that eating 2 to 3 meals a day spread over the day is what the research is showing is ideal for most people. So coming back to mindful eating isn't just about eating less food, it's about nourishing your body without judgment. And in fact, some of us may need to eat more food at certain times of the day, and our bodies will let us know this once we get confident in responding to our hunger and satiety signals. Just a brief recap on OMAD versus mindfulness in regards to eating. OMAD is controlled, rigid, and setting you up for poorer health with no guarantee of sustained weight loss. Mindful eating, on the other hand, encourages you to set up a practice of asking, what do I really need right now? And these reflective questions might help you start to understand the power of mindful eating. Am I eating in a way that honors my energy, emotions, and hunger? Do I feel peaceful or anxious around food timing, meal times, snack times, making a decision about when to eat or how much to eat? Another question, am I truly satisfied physically and emotionally after eating? So mindful eating is a process that starts before we actually put any food in our mouth, and it continues right through until we have finished eating. So just to summarize, there is no one right way to eat, but mindfulness gives you the tools to evaluate any approach. Seek professional advice before adopting OMAD or any intermittent fasting regime, especially if you have other medical conditions and take medications, are pregnant, or are recovering from disordered eating or an eating disorder. And if you have ever felt confused by the latest trends, you're certainly not alone. Be kind and gentle with yourself as you come back to your body, because it's wiser than any diet. If you need some help getting back in tune with your mind and body, then don't keep going it alone. That's the very reason why I offer a free 30-minute mindful eating strategy call. It allows us to talk about your eating challenges, what you've tried already, what you're wanting to achieve through your food choices. And from that information, I can then put a personalized plan together and show you how to achieve it. The link to book a call has been included with this episode's notes. Thanks for listening. And if you have enjoyed this episode or it's generated more comments or questions, then please share them with me. And if you really do believe this information can be of benefit to others, then please share it on your social media pages. Wishing you a mindful day ahead. You have been listening to the Eating For You podcast with Sally Ann Pisk. If you are looking for additional support to enjoy a lifelong way of healthier eating, then join me in a free 30-minute call to see if our approach is right for you. I have included the link to book an obligation-free call in this episode's notes.